welcome to episode 248 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford
and Paige Taylor.
And in today's episode, we will be talking about movies that we saw this week. And in part 2, we will be continuing our Patreon picks. This one comes from Ron Hayes, and it is 2000's Best in Show. Hopefully Ron will be satisfied. He sent us the suggestion probably 5 times. So the buck stops here. That's all I'll say. Let's go ahead and jump into... Actually, real quickly, we have some... just to let people know, we got some good reviews on the website right now. Andrew's Detective Pikachu review that we talked about last week. It's on the site. We have a John Wick 3 review from Logan Kinney. And then we also have, if you have not seen it yet, our schedule for Young Critics Watch Old Movies. We're having some possible guests trickle in, so that'll be added to the list on the website once we get confirmations on those. But yeah, it's exciting, so go to cinematary.com, check all that stuff out. But let's go into part 1. Andrew and Paige, you all have a movie that you have a lot of feelings about.
Yes, we do. This movie is called Braid. It is a 2019 movie, though it had a very small release in New York and LA. Now it's for free on Amazon Prime. It is sure to be my least favorite film of 2019 by some measure. And we're going to talk about why. I've enlisted Paige to come on the podcast with me today since we watched it together, and we both hate this movie a lot, and I just need help processing all my feelings about this thing.
Glad to be of assistance.
It is directed by a woman named Mitzi Perrone. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. My understanding is that in addition to being a filmmaker, she is also like an Instagram influencer. Am I right about this? You did some research on her page.
She is an actor and model and a bit of an influencer. Yes, she has like quite a substantial following.
What does that consist of? Is she like pushing makeup or something? Or
she's just posting hot pics. That's pretty much it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And trying to inspire future filmmakers.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, nothing wrong with any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Another bit of trivia that I learned about this movie is that it's the first movie ever financed entirely through cryptocurrency.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's more digging that I need to do about that, but that is what IMDb says about her.
I love that.
This movie, Braid, it is about 2 women who deal drugs and who maybe do online dominatrix work. There's some allusions to that, but it's not really fully explored. They are on the run from the law, and they end up hiding out in this huge old money mansion that has been inherited by one of their childhood friends. That friend is played by Madeline Brewer of the movie Cam. And you get some flashbacks to their childhood hangouts. You see that this friend liked to play house and play doctor with them, and she took these things very seriously to the point where people were injured and hospitalized. And now, as an adult, she seems to kind of still be playing the game. She is either entirely committed to the bit when they show up, or she is completely delusional. And the film very quickly spirals into a series of torture sessions, drug freakouts, dreams within dreams, and then many, many twists about who the real crazy person is. And it eventually escalates to like murder and suicide. And a really obnoxious scene where someone stares dead in the camera with a bowl of Fruit Loops and bangs their spoon on the bowl repeatedly for what feels like forever. What are your general feelings about this movie, Paige, before I give some more of mine?
I am so angry with this movie. I was just debating, like, how petty do I want to be about this? Because, it's her first film. Everybody,
be as petty as you like.
I'm going to be mega petty right now. If I ever see Mitzi in the street, I am throwing a sword at her feet and I'm blowing her on the spot. I am so angry. It's fine if you make a bad movie. I have shown bad movies before, and at the end of the day, they're harmless for the most part. You kind of just laugh it off. You're like, haha, that was so bad. But this was bad in a harmful way. The way this movie portrays the idea of crazy is mind-bogglingly juvenile. If you asked a 12-year-old to describe what crazy meant, this movie would be that definition. It's so horrible. And the thing that pisses me off the most is that Mitzi somehow got all these talented actresses. We have Madeline Brewer, Imogen Waterhouse, and Sarah Hay. They're all freaking great.
I think Madeline Brewer knows she's in a bad movie too.
Yes, she is hamming it up.
Yeah.
It's funny alone, but then, we're having to endure pure torture, so you can only enjoy it so much. But yeah, so she's got this fantastic crew, but it's directed and penned by Mitzi, who, to get an idea of just how bonkers this woman is, we pulled up an interview.
Because we weren't really sure what to make of it. And you were like, well, let's see what the director had to say about it. And that's all we needed to know, because now we know that she doesn't really have anything to say. But I have the interview pulled up. You have the interview pulled up. Let's just read off some quotes from her really quick.
Here's my favorite part. Someone says, the interviewer, Dread Central, says, describe the writing process. And she says, so I ended up in a room by myself, like a psychopath or a serial killer, with pictures, quotes, and a bunch of lines drawn everywhere. And I was suffering with the characters. I was fighting the battles of the characters, like Petula and her need to be validated by reality. She's an actress and a model, and she's constantly facing the uncertainty, financial and existential, of her jobs. And I was questioning reality with the movie, as the movie was questioning itself. And the more the movie was evolving and growing, I started getting financing for it. I realized the beast is growing. This is happening. I basically tricked myself into believing that I could do this, and now I'm doing it. It works. I dreamed myself into existence. This is crazy. I'm a director. How did this happen?
My favorite part of the interview is near the beginning, where she says the film is truly a philosophical essay. It came from a place of existential thinking. It came from a place of wondering what reality really is, how much of it is shaped by our thoughts, and what we are truly. What separates us from our dreams? What separates people who didn't make it and those who do make it into their dream life? Because in the end, we're all the same. How is it that some things do pan out for people and not for others? And I started thinking about kids playing make-believe. Why do we have this unwritten Bible in our head that tells us we have to play make-believe as kids to sort of rehearse life? There is no adult or parent who goes up to their children and tells them to play house now that so they can prepare for life. No, we just do this instinctual thing. Then, somehow, we stop playing make-believe to become adults. But what if we're the dream of a dream? What if we are in the shadows of our own dreams? What if we're part of a simulation? What if we're part of a hallucination?
Wow, brilliant, Mitzi.
Yeah.
So deep, dude. I love it.
So, to say a little bit more about the movie specifically, in terms of style, it is kind of all over the place. It uses a bunch of different aspect ratios, different color saturations. There are parts that are really, really hot pink, like Lisa Frank hot pink, and I'm kind of into that aesthetic cinematically, but she doesn't do much with it.
If I had it on mute, I'd be like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
But then I had to listen
kind of
to the writing.
Kind of like Climax a little bit. She's using the style to really hone in on different levels of reality or intoxication, but I think it's just so unfocused that it doesn't quite work.
You can tell she's a big fan of film. She just doesn't know what the hell she's doing.
Yeah. And the really bad thing here is that it just, it doesn't end up saying anything, like you said, other than people are crazy, which is
they're so crazy.
Very reductive view of mental health, and specifically suicide. I mean, I'm kind of personally sensitive at the moment to how the topic of suicide is handled on screen. And the way that happens here is just very irresponsible. Yeah. The movie is just constantly trying to up the ante in terms of edgy shock value, and then it uses suicide to kind of like put the final like nail in the coffin, so to speak, there. And it does it in this scene that has this awful Tim Burton-y aesthetic to it that totally distances me from anything the characters might be feeling. It's just like the movie doesn't make sense. The movie's not saying anything. It does not like move me in any way. And it's also like super harmful about all of the issues that it's trying to touch on, made by an obviously like very flailing, vacuous filmmaker.
And she's making more. She must be stopped. Somebody tell Mitzi the truth. The reason why we watch this is because I was fooled by Letterboxd. It has an unlimited amount of positive reviews.
They're almost all 4.5 star reviews.
I can't fathom like how she convinced all these people to write like these lies, basically. I just feel like these have to be like her mega fans that are obsessed with her.
Yeah, I wonder if it's people coming over from Instagram to Letterboxd and being primed to love this.
It must be. I was looking at her Instagram and they're all just in love with her. I just can't. Have I mentioned that I hate influencer culture so much? I hate it.
Yeah. And part of her interview, she talks about like being raised in Italy, I think, and then moving to New York because she wanted to like get to the core of the human condition or something. And she like took some theater classes or whatever. And one way to read like what happened here is that this is a person who comes from a place of extreme privilege, hanging out with like elite artsy types who wants to make something that matters and that is deep and says something, but she doesn't really understand what people are actually like. So she just kind of, I don't know, is throwing stuff at the wall, or she's like trying to do it in this very academic way that doesn't quite come together. But
it's
I think
obvious she hasn't experienced like actual trauma. Otherwise she would be a lot more delicate with it.
Maybe that's the important thing, because I was going to compare her to Sofia Coppola, who's also a filmmaker who comes from a world of extreme privilege, but also is an artist and has a voice. And part of that maybe is that Sofia Coppola tells stories about kind of the world that she knows. You know, most of her movies, as people like to say, are about like women in boxes, women in hotel rooms, women in these very enclosed gilded cages. And that was her life growing up under the wing of Francis Ford Coppola. And this is somebody who's like totally just veering off course, talking about experiences that they don't have and don't know anything about, and trying to make it into some sort of like edgy art thing, but it just fails on every level, I think.
Yep. Hot topic edginess, the movie.
Yeah. So have we reached the prime level of petty? Do we need to take it any farther?
Well, I threatened to throw a sword at her feet, so I feel like I got there.
Okay. Mission accomplished.
Well, for those who really want to go on a trip, where can they find Braid?
Oh, Amazon Prime. It's free. They should be paying you.
Please drink something beforehand.
Yeah.
Well, Paige, you saw the new release, Jonathan Wick the Third. If you could,
I did.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about Sir Jonathan.
Oh goodness, where do I begin with my boy Johnny? I love him. I love him so much. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna like talk about this through a film critic's eyes. This is just a big fan of Johnny and Keanu Reeves speaking here.
That's fine. This isn't a film podcast, so that's good.
I'm sorry. I've seen all 3 John Wicks, and I have increasingly enjoyed each one as they have come along, because they kind of started out with like, oh, it's the normal world, but here's Johnny. He's a crazy good spy/assassin. And now we've come to the realization that most of the world is just assassins. This is assassin world, and he's the best. He's the boogeyman. He's the king of assassins. And fuck it, I love that. That's so stupid. It's amazing. But I also thought like Spy Kids did that first, and I hated that realization. Everybody's a spy in Spy Kids, so they're just building off of that, I guess. But anyway, the visuals, the freaking the fighting, the action scenes are all phenomenal. It's so creative what they choose to be a weapon, and I know that's gross to say, but I love it. It's so creative. He freaking like shoots off of a horse. I love that. And if in any interview he's like, yeah, that was probably like the craziest thing I did was shoot from a horse. You know?
It was his idea, right?
I don't know. I've only read it was his idea.
In his interview with Simon Mayo of the BBC, he said that it was a recommendation to him from the director, and he was like, "Yeah, we can work that in."
He is so just dry and serious in his interviews. I love it. But yeah, and I also love that there really isn't. They're not trying to pretend to be deep. They're just like, this is the murder movie. Y'all love it. You love it. You love it a lot. You also love Keanu Reeves, so here it is. And all of the villains that he fights against, like, they don't have any ill will towards him. They're just like, this is business only, dude. And in fact, they adore him. They are in awe of him. There are many scenes where, as he's about to be in a fight, they're like, "It's an honor, John Wick. We're big fans. It is an honor to get my ass kicked by you."
And you're like,
exactly.
Same.
I would love to have my ass kicked by John Wick. I would deserve it if that were the case. I believe in him 100%. And also, what is her name? Damn, what is that?
Oh, I know the actor you're thinking of. The non-binary actor who's in John Wick 3. Is that right?
What? No, I was definitely talking about the lady Halle Berry. Yes. Halle Berry is in it, and she has a good segment where it's just focused on her and her two murder dogs while they're kicking ass, and it is great. Love that. That's another thing I want to praise about the John Wick movies is that every time there's a hot girl in the movie, you don't have to worry about John Wick making out with them unnecessarily. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't give a shit. He's just sad and he's gonna murder.
He just wants to kill him.
Okay, and all he cares about is his dog. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to care about. So she came on the screen. She's hot as hell. We don't have to worry about her being used to to make Johnny look cool. She's cool by herself. He's cool. I mean, that's all I gotta say, man. I love that movie.
Do you have a take on where this ranks with the other two John Wick movies, or are they all just consistently the same level?
I feel like most people consider them like consistent, but I feel like this one is the best one. I enjoyed it the most. It does not like pause a moment. It is 100% hype 100% of the time.
You mentioned it a little bit, but where do you kind of fall on the level of violence and gunplay in this?
We had a very heated conversation about this a couple years ago. I don't know if you listened to that episode, Paige.
How do I think it's bad for viewers to watch these movies?
Yeah,
Is that you mean?
Yeah, one of the people on this podcast sides more with that, and one of the people is on the opposite side of that. We'll leave that up in the air for the listener, but I'm going to listen to you.
You're talking to a girl who lived off of Mortal Kombat and just fighting movies in general. So I am in awe with fight choreography. I am very fascinated by stylized violence. I don't like when we have to see people hurt unnecessarily. It's more like the dance that I'm looking after, if that makes sense. And I feel like John Wick focuses more on style than reveling in hurting people. And that's what the difference is to me in enjoying this versus other violent films. To me, it's all about just looking cool and not murdering because murdering is fun, if that makes sense.
To clarify my position, so
what?
that I'm not misunderstood, is that, I think I've only seen the first two, right? But I don't think the John Wick movies are vacuous. I think that they are about something, and that something they're about is violence. It's about somebody who like had a violent past and is trying to put his violent past behind him, and it gets, wrestled back into the open, and he just kind of gets caught in it, and it gets worse and worse, and you kind of see him growing more and more exhausted with the violence that he has to carry out as the two movies go on. And you're supposed to like thematically think about the psychic toll that violence takes upon you, and how like once you get into a world of violence, it's very hard to get out of it. And my piece that I wrote a couple years back was really trying to square that with the fact that the movie, the cinema of it really aestheticizes the violence. Like the filmmaking says, look, the violence is cool, but the writing and the performance says, wow, this violence is bad. And that seems to me to be like a contradiction that I couldn't quite figure out in my head. And I haven't really heard people talking about it with the third one, so maybe they're dropping the issue, or maybe I was just projecting it.
I feel like they did. You're right. In the first one, they rely pretty heavily on that. He's wanting out, but in this one, he's just balls to the wall. I'm in. So I think they just kind of dropped that.
I'm very excited to see it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Also, the other question I have is, what is a parabellum?
Parabellum. He said it. He said it in the movie.
It's a Latin phrase. It's part of a longer Latin phrase that is basically like, if you want peace, prepare for war. And I think parabellum means prepare for war.
Ah, I thought it was a like a fruit
or part of the brain or something.
Good stuff. Well, John Wick 3 Parabellum is in theaters now. You can check it out. And if you take any solace in this, it dethroned Avengers Endgame as the top movie at the box office. So,
get him, Johnny.
I mean,
headshot.
Yeah, Jonathan took care of him. This past week I watched All the Light in the Sky, which I know has been a consistent recommendation by frequent co-host Nathan Smith. It's directed by Joe Swanberg. It's from 2012. And it stars Jane Addams, who people may have seen in Joe Swanberg's series that he has on Netflix called Easy. But Jane Addams plays this kind of struggling actress, pretty much an actress who seems like she's gotten decent, consistent work, but has not really broken the ceiling that she would want to. The movie opens and she's trying to get this part, but loses out to Kristen Wiig. It seems like she's kind of always second. Finishing in second behind the person who eventually gets the part. She also is suffering from insomnia, and so she spends most of the night watching this very droning it sounds like a droning TED Talk, which I guess she watches to kind of try to put her to sleep, which I respect that. If that's it, I don't know. I didn't do enough research to confirm that's what she's doing, but I respect that if that's what you're going to try to do to put you to sleep if you have insomnia, is just to listen to a droning TED Talk.
If anyone listens to Cinematary to put themselves to sleep, please reach out.
Yeah, no,
I want to hear from you.
Let me tell you, there's been some episodes. But she kind of gets a little bit of a boost when her niece, played by Sophia Takal, comes to visit her in her house in Malibu. She has this really cool seaside house that the ocean comes up almost under the house. It's up on stilts, and it's it has this really incredible visual very early on where she leaves, and then you kind of see her disappear, and then she pops up under the house and is on this paddleboard. And so her niece comes to visit, and for the rest of the movie, it's very typical mumblecore. You have these just kind of different scenes, different sequences between characters. Sometimes they're talking, sometimes they're interacting in some way. Later on in the movie, Kent Osborne shows up and plays a kind of somewhat love interest for Jane Addams, Sophia Takal's character. interacts with different friends of hers. Ty West shows up and hangs out with them for a while. Again, very, very, very mumblecore. You also run into Larry Fessenden, who I always remember from Kelly Reichardt's River of Grass, who is this neighbor and longtime friend of Jane Addams.
Is Andrew Bajowski in this one?
He is not, no. And Joe Swanberg does not show up either. So it's actually a relatively light cast in terms of familiar faces that you see. There's not too many people interacting in this movie, but for the most part, you do have these kind of contemplative moments. I think much more than a lot of Swanberg's movies, the visual sense of it is much more engaging than usual. A lot of the times he has these kind of, Chicago, LA settings that are very, handheld and digital that aren't as, visually appealing as most. And this one has this beautiful beach view. A lot of scenes take place like at sunset, and you have this purple and yellow and orange kind of meshing together in the sky as they look out into the sea. But it's also this movie, that kind of works with that plot point that she, suffers from insomnia and struggles to kind of find any moment of rest, because a lot of these characters are all somewhat in the middle, kind of trying to hold on before things become much more, for a lack of a better phrase, real. I think that the epitome of the entire movie is this sequence where Larry Fessenden's character and Sophia Takal's character are sitting on the beach, and he's talking about his decision to live in these houses because, immediately you look at them and you're like, well, these things are not going to last. They're just on these kind of wooden plank stilts, above the water. The water is getting closer and closer. They have the rocks, but those won't last much longer. And that's kind of his point. And he's talking to her. He's like, we came here and I was so happy to get a house at this spot at this moment because it's such a beautiful location. You have the beach here, you have this amazing view, and you have this ability to be right there on the water. But he also recognizes that, he says, like, in 10 years this will probably not be here. And, at that point, he's like, I'll leave and I'll find the next spot that, you just have to be at for a specific period of time. And to me, that kind of spoke to a lot of feelings in 2019, even more than 2012, where a lot of these, especially natural elements, are kind of withering away, and you feel this sense of helplessness, and you're unable to save it, and so at least in the theory of these characters and maybe Joe Swanberg, it's like if you're unable to save it, you might as well be there experiencing it and living in that area before it goes away forever, because that's all you can do. And you kind of get that feeling with a lot of that movie, that a lot of it is these characters who are unable to get to whatever point that they're trying to get to. They may be dissatisfied with the point they're at and not sure of where to go next, but they try to find these small moments of bliss within the moments that they're living. And it's just a lot of different sequences of that in the film. And I think that the mumblecore, we talked about it a little bit when we did our Greta Gerwig series and talked about Hannah Takes the Stairs, but I feel like with mumblecore movies it can kind of get wearing, and I know people have a lot of their biases against Swanberg's movies and just that type of film, but I think this one is one of the great ones, and really does have this transcendence feeling that I think speaks a little bit more than just the general mumblecore movie. I would go as far to say as like Joe Swanberg made a successful Hong Sang-soo movie.
Would you count yourself as a fan of the whole mumblecore genre in general, if you could call it a genre?
I'm hit or miss on it. I like a lot of Swanberg's stuff. I really do like him because I think he does interesting stuff as a director, especially with not since there's not much of a script. I like what he does with his actors and the kind of space that he gives them. But I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty hit or miss with those movies. So
I'm also wondering if it's fair to call Support the Girls a mumblecore movie.
Yeah. I don't know.
Considering it's by one of the founders.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know if I would classify it that, but I would be curious what Nathan thinks, but I don't know. I personally wouldn't classify it as a mumblecore movie.
Doesn't have the same tone, the same like style of shooting.
Yeah, and it doesn't have like the same, like it has the same ambition in terms of the interactions between the characters. But I feel like it doesn't.
Yeah, that's all very mundane.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the same ambitions in terms of like how it's created, if that makes any sense. Like it feels like it's a step up from what the mumblecore movies kind of were, but at the same time,
polished.
Yeah, but it has the same soul.
In the Wikipedia article of mumblecore, Support the Girls is listed as mumblecore.
Oh shit.
Okay.
Well, okay. I'm sorry.
I mean, claim it if you can claim it. I would claim it if I was a genre.
Well, if you're a fan of these, or if you really want to see just a really wonderful performance by Jane Addams, I would recommend All the Light in the Sky. It's on Canopy. They just added a bunch of mumblecore movies there, and so this was one that was pretty unavailable to an extent, because I remember Nathan talking about it a number of times. So yeah, check it out while you can on Canopy. Well, we're going to take a short break, and then we will be back talking Best in Show in part 2 after this.
Hey, Cinematary listeners, Andrew here. During this break in the show, I'd like to mention that Cinematary does want your money. You can give us your money at patreon.com/cinematary, where you can chip in a small fee of about $5 a month, the price of a fancy coffee, in exchange for shout outs in every episode, the opportunity to choose movies we cover on the show, and bonus episodes every month in which we talk about more movies as well as other miscellaneous stuff. In the past, we've just been humbly asking for you to share the show and engage with us, and we would still love for you to do those things. You can tweet us at Cinematary, send us an email, zach@cinematary.com, leave us a review on iTunes, all that stuff. But Cinematary has grown a ton in the past few years due to the hard work of a bunch of writers, myself included, who haven't been paid for their labor, which is sadly a pretty normal thing. We record things and write things for free, you listen to and read them for free, and the only people getting paid are like Apple and Google, which is depressing. So, if you appreciate what we do, if you feel like there's some sort of value being exchanged here and you'd like more of it, help us normalize paying people by going to patreon.com/cinematary and chipping in $5 a month. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
I used to be able to name every nut that there was, and that used to drive my mother crazy because she used to say, Harlan Pepper, if you don't stop naming nuts. And the joke was, of course, that we lived in Pine Nut. And I think that's what put it in my head at that point. So I'd go to sleep. She'd hear me in the other room, and she would just start yelling. I'd say, peanut, hazelnut, cashew nut, macadamia nut. That was the one that would send her into going crazy. She said, you stop naming nuts. And Hubert used to be able to make the sound, and he wasn't talking, but he used to go, it sounded like macadamia nut. Pine nut, which is a nut, but it's also the name of the town. Pistachio nut, red pistachio nut, natural, all natural white pistachio nut.
And we are back with part 2 of episode 248 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our Patreon pick series with 2000's Best in Show. This was a pick by Ron Hayes, who mentioned in his email that he's heard every episode since episode 54. He says, greetings, Cinematarians. My Patreon, he says my patron pick, sorry. My patron pick is Anything by Christopher Guest. My personal favorites are Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show, but I'd be happy to hear you discuss any of his work. Here's the thing. Guest's films are widely described as mockumentaries, a term I've heard he despises because it seems to imply he's mocking the characters. So what do you think? Is Corky St. Clair a sweet-natured tribute to amateur theater directors, or just a mean-spirited parody of a gay thespian with small talent and big dreams? Are Meg and Hamilton Swan, the dog-fancying yuppies, just high-strung animal lovers, or an assault on an entire generation of spoiled brats? Thank you, Ron.
I think we're going to have to put a pin in those questions at the end and maybe come back to them later. My thoughts on the Christopher Guest's hang up on the term mockumentary is maybe I just interpret the word differently than he does. I've always thought it meant you were mocking the documentary form, not mocking the subjects of the documentary.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Best in Show, it was directed by Christopher Guest, written by Guest and Eugene Levy. The film stars Guest, Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Jennifer Coolidge, Jane Lynch, Michael McKean, John Michael Higgins, Parker Posey, Bob Balaban, and Michael Hitchcock. And the film follows 5 entrants in a prestigious dog show and focuses on the slightly surreal interactions among the various owners and handlers as they travel to the show and then compete during the show. The working titles of this film were Dog Show and Untitled Documentary, which I love.
Documentary.
A June 2001 story in Variety noted that although Christopher Guest and Eugene Levy wrote a master plan for the script, most of the dialogue was improvised by the actors. A total of 60 hours of footage was shot, which was later trimmed to 90 minutes. To assume the accuracy of the picture, Guest and producer Karen Murphy spent months attending and researching dog shows. Erlene Luke, a professional dog handler who served as the film's technical advisor, taught the principal actors how to handle their dogs in the show ring. The dog show, which was filmed in a large auditorium filled with dog owners, handlers, and audience extras, took 5 days to shoot and was based on the annual Westminster Dog Show in New York City. The idea for Best in Show was born during a trip writer-director Christopher Guest took 6 years ago from 2000 to his local dog park to exercise is to own 2 dogs. Quote, there were people there with purebred dogs, with mutts and so on, and as I mingled with them, I started thinking that this might be an interesting idea to explore in a movie. In mid-1998, Guest called Levy with the idea and was told no. Levy was nervous about the 3rd act of the movie, not knowing how to make a dog show funny. Producer Karen Murphy spent 3 months researching dog shows, learning about the many breeds, making contacts, lining up consultants and trainers, and finding the hundreds of dogs that would be, quote, auditioned for the film. During the process, Murphy gained appreciation for what she terms as, quote, a rich, unique, sometimes eccentric, and complex world. I was impressed by the variety of people, from young junior handlers who are very serious and professional to flamboyant middle-aged showmen with flashy rings and incredible outfits who have obviously made a career of this. It's great to give this background to an actor. No actual dog show would allow them to film on site, so they had to create their own. The New York Times said, although Mr. Guest's brand of comedy has been called deadpan, it was only the first of his 3 movies, the rock spoof This Is Spinal Tap, that kept its tongue firmly in its cheek. Best in Show, like Waiting for Guffman, is a subtly smirking gallery of caricatures, most of whom don't seem to belong to a particular region or class. Roger Ebert said, just as Guffman ended with the ill-fated pageant, Best in Show ends with the dog show itself, depending on the built-in structure of the competition to bring all of the owners and their stories together at the same time. Satires have a way of running out of steam, but the suspense of the judging process keeps the energy high, even apart from an assist by the dog who attacks the judge, inspiring Buck's most appreciative play-by-play commentary. On that note, let's get into Best in Show. I guess we'll start, since Ron is wondering about our history with Christopher Guest movies. What is everybody else's? I have seen pretty much all of his stuff, including some of his outside acting gigs from his own movies, but I've seen all of his directing features and Spinal Tap, which the New York Times referenced as his, but was directed by Rob Reiner, so, you know, fact check yourself there, New York Times. But Andrew, Paige, what about you all? Have you seen any Christopher Guest movies prior to this?
This is my first directed by Christopher Guest movie. I have also seen Spinal Tap. I think it's fair to call that a Christopher Guest movie. He's certainly a he feels kind of like an authorial voice in there, maybe one of several authorial voices. Yeah, this is my first interaction with him as a director. I love This Is Spinal Tap. I don't think it's a controversial opinion to say it's one of the best comedies of all time. And Best in Show didn't quite reach those heights for me, probably because of how much more tongue-in-cheek it is, like you said in your info sheet, Zach. But I'm curious to dig into with you guys. Paige, what about you?
Yeah, this is also my first Christopher Guest directed by movie. I have also seen Spinal Tap, and I'm pretty sure I watched it with Andrew and Jesse for New Year's, right? A double feature.
Mm-hmm. We watched 2 Rob Reiner movies, that and When Harry Met Sally, which ends on New Year's Eve.
Yes. That was a good night.
That's your review of Spinal Tap. It was a good night on New Year's.
It was a good night. That's a good way to bring in the new year, man.
So that Ron's other thing was, what do you make of the kind of, I guess, what do you make of the characters? Because in every one of Christopher Guest's movies, he has a rotating cast of the same people. You see Eugene Levy, you see Catherine O'Hara, you see Michael McKean, you see Guest playing somebody, and they're always playing to a degree, a caricature of something in all the movies that they're in. I guess, what do you make of that? Do you feel like he, kind of like what Guest is saying, do you feel like he's mocking these people, or is he mocking more just the kind of absurdity of like what they're a part of? Because like with this one, I've seen dog shows, and I've seen people who participate in dog shows, and they are a very eccentric bunch of people, and this feels more like it is an overblown version of it, but it feels like you've seen people who are kind of like this with their animals. So I'm curious to see what you think of the characters.
I think it's kind of tricky. It's strange to me that Christopher Guest would be so staunchly against the notion that he is using mockumentary to mock his subjects, because it seems very clear to me that he's mocking his subjects. It's hard to watch a scene like the one between the married couple that Parker Posey is a part of, where they're talking about how they met at 2 different Starbuckses, and one of them was like reading an LL Bean catalog, and then they found out they were both like J. Crew people, and like it's hard to watch that and not think, oh, this person thinks these people are buffoons.
It didn't feel like a love letter to people. But
the thing that's kind of tricky about it is that my understanding of this and Spinal Tap, the thing that they're both doing is sort of mocking the culture that crops up around a certain sociological phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it. Like Spinal Tap isn't just about making fun of these specific musicians, but making fun of like boys club metal culture in general. And maybe implying that these are the type of people who are going to flock to this type of thing. And I guess you could say the same thing about the dog shows here, though it's a bit more of a stretch because, like you said in your info sheet, these are people from very different walks of life. It's not like dog show people be like this. It's like dog show people are weird and all over the place.
I think even people that are involved with like ridiculous cultures can agree that what they're involved in is absolutely kooky, and they know it's not a direct attack against themselves, but the specific culture that is, developed out of that. So I don't feel like it's mean-spirited. It's definitely making fun of, dog shows, but he's not directly attacking every individual who participates.
I mean, do you think that there's a person in this movie that the movie goes out of its way to show empathy towards?
Empathy.
I can't think of one.
Well, I kind of see it more like in the sense of like a Jacques Tati movie, where it's more of like the comedy of the absurdity from the observation. Like, again, none of the characters that are portrayed in this are actual people, but it's like he takes like a level of that from the person and then exaggerate it right to a giant degree, and he does that with all of his movies. I mean, Guffman does kind of like what you were saying, and Andrew, where it's mocking more of the socio culture around it. Guffman does that with small town theater. And this one with dog shows. A Mighty Wind does it with kind of folk bands and bands that have kind of aged out and are trying to kind of come back in. And then you have For Your Consideration, which is about just award circuits in Los Angeles, and then Mascots, his most recent one, is about that competition. But he's constantly, I kind of look at him in the lens of Jacques Tati, where he's finding the comedy out of the observations of the absurdity of the mundane out of these situations.
I think the Tati comparison is a good one, and I think I feel it more in some parts of the movie than others. The place that feels most Tati-esque is the actual dog show itself, specifically in how the movie is juxtaposing these little one-liners from Fred Willard to these big top-down shots of the full dog show and like the regalia of it, because Fred Willard will say something absolutely ridiculous, and then there will be no response from his co-panelist, and it'll just cut to that really big wide shot, and you're just like watching these people position themselves along the stadium, and it's funny in the fact that nothing is happening, kind of like certain parts of Playtime, right? But there are also, like, over half of the movie is more of the kind of fly on the wall interviews, like documentary style, that feels more like it's kind of attacking the characters individually.
The Fred Willard character, though, I love because he's like if you took like Bob Costas from like the Olympics or something and put him into a dog show, because you call like a baseball game or a football game much differently than you would a dog show, and just that the complete, and see, that's the other thing that I makes me go it kind of leads into the absurdity is the way that each of these actors goes up, because they a lot of them give fantastic performances.
Oh
like
my gosh,
Catherine O'Hara
is great.
She's so good, and she's so good, and Eugene Levy is like, they're just so good. And I think that that's the other thing, is that you're so sold by what they're trying to do because there's such a commitment to the part. It's not like one of those kind of satirical things where it's somebody just, I'm thinking of like, and thank God Nathan's not here, but it's like a, Adam Sandler movie where he just kind of makes a funny voice and is acting like somebody. Like, there's such a commitment to this persona that all of these actors take. The way that Jennifer Coolidge will deliver lines in this movie, I love. This is the third time I've seen it, and like the line where she's there sitting down with her husband and talking about how they love both talking and not talking, and how they could find stuff to not talk about or talk about for hours, is just like, give her a Nobel Peace Prize for how she delivers that.
Okay, so
I think my favorite performance in that whole movie is Parker Posey losing her shit about that busy bee to that pet store guy. I love that.
Oh my God.
Loved it so much. He's like, this is like when she finally chooses a toy, he's like, this is what least looks like a bee in the whole store. It was brilliant.
You mentioned, gosh, what was the character you mentioned about talking and not talking? I forget the actress's name.
Jennifer Coolidge's character.
Jennifer Coolidge's character. You have her as well as, oh God, I'm blanking on her name too. This is great podcasting. Jane Lynch. You have her and Jane Lynch kind of as like a lesbian couple by the end of the movie. And then you have this other gay couple on the other end of the competition. And I'm wondering how they factor into the question of, are these people being mocked? And is there like weirdness? Because I think we can all agree that the point of these characters is that they're weird in different ways. Is there weirdness that they're gay, or is it something else?
I don't think so. I was watching out for that. Like, I was trying to think, like, how does this world react to them being gay? And it seems like nobody is bothered by this. Nobody even mentions it.
Other than Fred Willard saying, like, if you were wearing that in my neighborhood, you'd have to be a hotel clerk or something like that.
I don't know, everybody seems pretty accepting of them, so I feel like they just happen to be gay, and they're definitely weird, but it's not because they're gay.
I guess I'm wondering, like, not how other people react to them, but how the camera is assuming we will react to them. You know, just by putting them under a microscope in this way, like, is it inviting us to laugh at their identities? I don't know.
I think it's inviting us to laugh at, like, again, it's like the most heightened version of the identity. Like, John Michael Higgins is playing the most flaming gay character ever. And I think that's kind of, and so, like, it's like, again, it goes back to the whole absurdity of it, where the absurdity is not that he's gay. The absurdity of it is, like, the painstaking ways they go about, like, preparing for the event, or getting ready for the event, and just, the chatter that they have, the kind of cattiness that they have between them and the Jane Lynch character, who is, like, the defending champ. I think that's more of what the absurdity for them is, rather than their sexuality.
I really liked the gag of John Michael Higgins packing all of his kimonos for the 48 hours they're going to spend in New York. You're packing 7 kimonos? We're only going to be there for 48 hours. Oh, I should pack 8.
Yeah, this one, now, Best in Show is probably my favorite of Christopher Guest's movie, because I think it does consistently deliver like, funny moments. It's funny, though, because Guest, I think, kind of gets more, he puts himself a little bit more in the background past Guffman and Spinal Tap. And the movies after this, A Mighty Wind and For Your Consideration and Mascots, he's very much in the background, while he's relatively prominent in this one, and delivers the amazing scene of him naming nuts in the in the car.
Naming all the nuts.
But I mean, I would be curious, since we watched this, in terms of I guess gay stereotypes. If I would recommend you guys check out Waiting for Guffman and his portrayal as Corky St. Clair, the theater director in this small town, because it's very much it's a very similar. I think that if everybody had seen that, also, it'd be an interesting discussion to compare that character to the Michael McKean, John Michael Higgins pair in this one.
What's your general stance on it? Is looking at both of those in tandem make you more or less sympathetic to what he's doing with that here?
I think there is a sympathy, especially to Corky St. Clair, the character that Christopher Guest plays in Guffman, because there's just this kind of this sadness to him that he is this, he was trying to kind of make it big in New York and make it big on the largest stage, and kind of struck out, and now is teaching, local theater in this small town, and has gained such an appreciation from the townspeople for him, that he's gained this kind of celebrity status within that circle. And so watching him, the funny moments of that come more from him reacting to what the expectations for this small town play is, rather than anything to do with his sexuality. And plus he has the amazing line of when he's upset and he runs home and says he's going to go home and bite his pillow. So, which is fantastic. But I guess the other thing I'm curious is, I don't know how much you all have seen of kind of the mockumentary format. I think that really Christopher Guest movies were kind of the origins of something like The Office or Modern Family, or a lot of these quote mockumentary style TV shows, and I think that's been very instrumental when it comes to comedy in this kind of era, because I think I think that The Office and Parks and Recreation and shows and stuff like that, where you have that mockumentary kind of quality to it, it's been pretty prevalent. So I guess kind of as the harbinger of that, what did you make of this, and do you kind of see those elements in terms of modern comedy.
I think it's interesting to talk about how mockumentaries have moved into the world of TV, considering the conversation we just had about the camera's relationship to its subjects and how much like condescension there is there. Because in the shows that you named, The Office and Parks and Rec, I think that, especially in The Office, there's at first a lot of mocking. And then as the TV show goes on, just from the nature of a TV show, you develop more of a relationship with the characters, and it becomes more empathetic over time because you can't just sustain that like bitter, just condescending tone for seasons and seasons and seasons. But if you compare it to the precious few mockumentary films that we have, like Walk Hard or Pop Star, I think that those are much more like focused on like skewering the characters the entire time.
Yeah, but or an even more explicit example, which is very much in line with what Christopher Guest does, and that is Taika Waititi's What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting case. I feel like those characters are so charming and endearing, you can't help but like them, even if the movie is trying to make you think they're idiots.
Which I think there is a bit of that in like something like Best in Show. Like I really enjoy Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara's every scene that they're in, just because you like them.
The cucking of Eugene Levy.
Yeah, or just the fact that every guy recognizes Catherine O'Hara, and Eugene Levy really can't do any. Like the scene where they're staying at her ex-boyfriend's house and having dinner and stuff is just. It enters this whole, and that's where I go back to Catherine O'Hara just giving this incredible performance, because the way that she just turns whenever people like notice her, and she's just like, Brett. it's so wonderful. But yeah, I think it's just interesting and I think you make a good point that the mockumentary kind of evolves over time with the TV show, just because it's kind of forced to. And I think that Christopher Guest, what he does with his format is kind of different from something like Walk Hard or Pop Star, where it's more spoofing. It's less as engaged with like the characters and more with like a larger, like it's much more in line with something like Spinal Tap, where it's trying to get at more of an entity than. Even though, as somebody who just rewatched Walk Hard, they do like to take some shots at like Roy Orbison and Johnny Cash in the John O'Reilly character, or John C. Reilly character,
which I hadn't really considered before getting into the middle of this conversation, that Christopher Guest is kind of the guy who has pioneered this form, and maybe there are other. Like primogenitors that I'm not aware of or something like that. But thinking about it that way, and thinking about how widespread mockumentary is now, like it's kind of surprising that he's not thought of as this. And I think to a certain extent he's thought of as a comedy godfather or something, but I don't think that like in circles of cinephiles he's really talked about in the same way that, a Jerry Lewis or a Charlie Chaplin or somebody would, who also like pioneered various forms of comedy.
Well, how would both of you kind of, to the best of your ability, try to describe his style of comedy? I know the New York Times referred to it as deadpan, but I'm just trying to think of, when you think of some of those more visual, physical, comedic people, that I think it comes down to it's much harder to defend, or I guess try to sell on, this is all verbal, like this is very much, which I guess kind of leads into more of like pre-code, early cinema, like Lubitsch or something, mm-hmm. where it's much more of like a verbal reportee. I mean, what do you all make of what his comedy style is? And maybe that's the what make that's kind of the impasse that people have.
I've always felt that movies that like allow their performers to kind of go off script and just kind of have fun to feel more genuine than a comedy that is definitely like, just deliver the line, here's a joke, pause for effect, deliver the line, pause for effect. I always feel like this offers like just more of a sense of authenticity, this kind of humor, though it is definitely mean-spirited overall. I feel like it's enjoyable in that it's like each of these performers are definitely just having fun with their characters. So I think ultimately I would describe it as playful meanness. Genuine playful meanness.
Which is interesting because I feel like, especially in the Judd Apatow age, you would I think that you could try to describe like Superbad and Knocked Up and a lot of those movies as playful meanness as well. And so, but I feel like there's a definite difference between what Guest is doing and what Apatow and his comedies are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that in general, I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum from Paige. Like in the abstract, I want my comedy to be written. I want my comedy to be like visual and physical whenever it can be. But I think that maybe what differentiates Christopher Guest from my limited exposure to him is just the form of, we are going to shoot a comedy like it's a documentary. And I guess from your info sheet, Zach, that involves a very different kind of production too. I mean, in a Judd Apatow movie, we have a scenario and we're just like asking people to riff on it. But considering they shot like, what was it like? Was it 6 hours of footage or 60 hours of footage?
60.
60.
Oh
like that seems to me like it's almost like we're doing this like long form improv, right? We're letting these people like flow through these scenarios and we're just like picking it all up and then going back into the edit and finding the good bits, just like Frederick Wiseman would putting together a documentary, which creates a very unique form of comedy, if that is indeed what he's doing. I don't know much about behind the scenes.
What a way to describe it, though, that Christopher Guest is making comedies like Frederick Wiseman makes documentaries.
The Frederick Wiseman of comedies,
well,
yeah.
I think the closest comparison in terms of even more modern equivalents, and this was happening really at the same time as Christopher Guest's movie, but Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm is very much the same thing, where that he gives him, he gives the actors a sheet that gives them a bare outline of what the scene is going to be, and then it's completely improvised and they just do it a million times and then whittle it down. And that was very much the same. I think that I meant to put it on the info sheet, but they were given like a 15-page, this is what the movie's about, here's the characters, this is the kind of setup, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, most of it is improvised. So I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe that's the disconnect, like we were kind of getting at, between cinephiles and embracing Christopher Guest, is that it's harder to define, I guess, what you qualify as cinematic comedy, and because I mean, Curb Your Enthusiasm is utterly hilarious, at least to me, but it's also, it kind of treads that line where, are you looking for more of that improvised back and forth, or are you looking for the more physical sense, like Andrew, you were talking about? I
wonder if mockumentary is only feels like a cinematic form of comedy when it's new, because in a vacuum, mockumentary is an extremely cinematic form of comedy because the humor comes from the form, right? But when a movie like this has been out for however many years, this came out in 2000, but Spinal Tap has been around a lot longer than that, and like you see it being done in many, many, many different contexts, the form itself stops being the thing that's funny, and you have to fill that form with like the content that is maybe more familiar, like more I don't know, typically found in other forms of comedy.
Yeah, and I get that, because I think that the quality level of guests' work kind of starts to dwindle away. Like, A Mighty Wind is weaker than Guffman and Best in Show. The same with For Your Consideration, and his latest one, Mascots, which came out a couple years ago on Netflix, is pretty forgettable. And yeah, I think that you have a point there where it's like the format has kind of lost its, especially in the, we talked about, The Office and Parks and Rec and a lot of these other things kind of taking the format and doing something more evolved with it, that you're required to do something. You're really required to kind of up your game and do something unique, or it kind of feels tired. And I feel like, especially with Mascots, which came out a couple years ago, I can't really remember too many moments from that, because it is kind of just a retread on a lot of the greatest hits from his other movies.
So what were Ron's questions at the beginning again? Let's just do lightning round answers to those questions real quick.
Okay, let me pull them up. We're gonna have a nice dead air period.
Okay. In that
Paige has
meantime,
jokes.
who did you guys root for?
Paige, hit us up with some dog jokes while we find the email.
Oh, I was. That's not what I mean, okay.
Oh.
I was asking who you guys were rooting for.
Oh, in the show?
Yeah, I wanted Hubert to win.
Which one is Hubert?
He's the bloodhound, the wrinkly boy.
I was rooting for
too.
the bloodhound. Yep. 100%. Once that man listed off all the nuts, I was on his team, 100%.
He has telekinetic ability. How could I not?
Okay, so dog jokes really quick and then questions.
Can I just really quickly add the other funny thing that his character has is right before he leaves and he works at that fishing shop, and the employee that works with him is he's like, so are you going to go fishing in Philadelphia? He's like, no, I got to go to this dog show, man. I'm not going to have time. He's like, well, they got some lakes and stuff around there. And he's like, no, I got to go to the dog show. And then when he waves goodbye, he's like, all right, have a fun time fishing. I don't know. That entertained me this time. It was just good.
That is good.
Dog jokes.
Okay, here's, let's see. Here's a joke from the 40 funniest dog jokes for kids of all age from care.com. Which dog breed absolutely loves living in the city? A New Yorkie. Wow.
Okay.
So
Give me another one.
Okay. What do you get when you cross a sheepdog with a rose? A cauliflower.
Okay, that's good. I like that one.
It's not good.
Can we get that? But it's read by Adam Driver and
Yes.
Logan Lucky.
What did you say? You said Adam Driver. In my mind, blacked out. I love him.
In Logan Lucky, cauliflower.
Oh my cauliflower. Yes. Jordan said if we ever get a white cat, we have to name him Cauliflower. But it specifically has to be that cat that looks like Adam Driver. Which is horrible. I hate that.
Okay,
Anyway.
Zach, what were the questions from Ron?
We kind of hit all of them. I could read them again, but
Okay.
we kind of touched on them. So he says, what do you think? Is Corky St. Clair a sweet-natured tribute to amateur theater directors, or just a mean-spirited parody of every gay thespian with small talent and big dreams? Are Meg and Hamilton Swan the dog-fancying yuppies just high-strung animal lovers, or an assault on an entire generation of spoiled brats?
Oh, it's an assault on an entire generation, 100%.
We are not supposed to feel any sympathy for those two.
If for anyone who braved the 4,000 words of my Detective Pikachu review and got to the part where I was talking about cultivated identity, they are the embodiment of cultivated identity. You are the concept of a J. Crew person does not exist in nature. You have to be taught by advertising to believe that you are a J. Crew person. That is an assault for sure.
There's the assault on nature. If you're a J. Crew person, sorry, you shouldn't listen to this podcast because you're an assault on nature. All right. Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on cinematary.com, but you can also find us on Facebook, facebook.com/cinematary, on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/cinematary, and on Twitter at handle @cinematary. I knew I forgot one. We would like to shout out to our patrons. We're giving them some love, right now, and Shout out to Whitney Rio Ross, Tyler Chandler, Ron Hayes, Matthew Lingo, Maggie, Christopher Metcalf, Chad Newsom, and Cam. I went backwards this time, mixing it up.
Also, next week is going to be May's Patreon exclusive episode, so be on the lookout for that. And we got some ideas on what these Patreon episodes are going to be for the near future, and I hope that people respond positively to those.
Yeah, if we follow through with what Nathan is pitching, there may be a quiz for some people. If you can, let me just say, there's gonna be readings.
There's gonna be readings you have to do.
It's gonna be, it's we need to find that kid some other work because he needs to let that energy out somewhere.
He's got to use his master's degree somehow.
Yeah, that's the economy we live in now. Well, thank you guys for listening. We will see you next week with another Patreon pick episode. Have a good week.